In 2024, I ended up playing a lot of great video games. I made a lot of new favorites that year. These games all ranged from ones and franchises I had loved for practically my whole life to ones and franchises I had never touched. But from Pikmin to Sekiro to Metal Gear Solid 3, none of those incredible games scratched the same itch that Katamari Damacy did. Katamari Damacy, for those who aren't familiar, is one of the most deceptive and ingeniously simple games out there. It lets you indulge in your most primal human urges by giving you the freedom to roll everything around you up into a giant ball so you can launch it into space and make it into a star. Your Katamari, as it's called, will increase in size as you collect more things, allowing you to absorb even larger objects in the process. The goal of each level is, in all but a few cases, achieved by making as massive a Katamari as you can. There's a majestic simplicity to Katamari Damacy. Mechanically, it sounds so simple, it's hard to believe you could even have that much fun with it. Yeah? Try saying that while listening to the game's OST and get back to me on that. I won't tell you there's a lot of intensive thought going into my gameplay here, but the sense of growth you experience within single levels and throughout the entire game is deeply rewarding. For one thing, the controls are a little quirky and they take some practice to utilize effectively. You can't control the camera since the analog sticks are both being used to maneuver your Katamari, so that's already something of a learning curve to overcome. Once you reach the end of your first playthrough, you may as well be a different person in terms of how well you can simply move around, which is the entire foundation of the game. Turning just makes more sense now. Doing 180-degree turns becomes useful far more frequently, and even when something bumps you into a corner and sends you flying, you're more calm than you used to be. You're more used to the momentum and physics. You aren't being taken off guard by much of anything now. Mastery of the controls is one thing, but simply growing larger as each level's visual indicator of your progress feels incredible from the very beginning. Bumping into an object or getting thrown off to the side by a creature makes you feel weak, insignificant. I mean, you may as well be an insect. Going and rolling up more things, coming back around to the same obstacle that once gave you grief, and finally smushing it in there with everything else, it feels amazing every time. This is a sensation that no fancy writing or editing trick can communicate fully. You just have to play the game to know what it feels like. Suffice it to say, Katamari Damacy is a pretty great game, one that a lot of people love, including me. One question though that kind of puzzled me throughout my first playthrough was, what is this game's message? What is a game so unabashedly off the wall trying to say about the human condition, if anything? The game's director and creator, Keita Takahashi, has definitively said that the original game was built as a critique of mass consumption, and that's definitely clear to spot in retrospect. Firstly, as the Prince of all Cosmos, you are constantly being nagged by the King of all Cosmos to fix the mess that he made. He's responsible for causing all of this, but no, you have to be the asshole who fixes it. While he's off fucking around in the Netherlands or Spain, he just watches you try and undo the problem he created of destroying the entire solar system. Even presents he gets for you, he ends up losing in some comical way, making yet another thing your problem. Listen, son, I'm very proud of you. Like, happy birthday. I'm really happy for. Oh, look, I forgot your present. It's down there somewhere. Look, you just gotta roll it up. You'll get a funny little guitar. It'll be worth it. Happy birthday. Your character is overworked, underappreciated, and spends the whole game trying to get the attention and admiration of his father that he will never get because the King of all Cosmos is kind of a dick. You are made to obsessively collect as many things as you can in a constantly growing desire to acquire more and more until you huck all of it into the insatiable, infinite abyss of space. Along the way, you are most definitely inflicting a significant amount of stress on the denizens of Earth and definitely, for sure, not killing them when they're flung into outer space inside a giant ball. I think that reading is pretty clear to see, and it's almost unsettling when you read the story this way, when the aesthetic choices behind the rest of the game feel almost completely at odds with this idea, considering how joyous it feels to play it. Personally though, if I were to posit my own take on the game that doesn't feel as dissonant with the colorful graphics and cheerful music, I found there to be a greatly positive undercurrent of simply appreciating our planet and all of the cool things and people on it. These two takeaways aren't mutually exclusive, to be clear, but I find myself feeling a much stronger aim to be celebratory over being critical in this game. To me, the fact that there's a collection screen of everything you've picked up doesn't feel so much like the game is criticizing something, but more a testament to how many incredible things are on this planet in the first place. The big issue I have with the consumer culture angle is that the implication there is that the things you're rolling up are products, likely disposable ones. Things that are ultimately not needed, frivolous commodities that we don't need to be happy. I want to make it abundantly clear that I agree overwhelmingly with this commentary of less is more. I could certainly stand to throw out some things and clean my room. My argument is that I don't find that Katamari is looking at its own collectibles this way, because the things you pick up in this game aren't limited to products or disposable commodities. You certainly don't need all of this stuff to be happy, but life also wouldn't be the same without some of these things. The one common thread is that all of it is uniquely human, things that make our planet what it is, ways of carrying on our memories, history, culture, and ideas. You collect foods, from fruits and vegetables to different kinds of cake. You collect buildings, architecture, and the tools that built them. You collect artifacts, symbols with meaning and history to millions of people. You collect sporting gear and equipment, cooking utensils, different kinds of clothing, art supplies, flora and fauna, you name it. Every single one of those things is an interactable object in the game that someone had to model, create collision for, and scale to the rest of the game's objects. Instead of feeling scathing, the impression I get from this game is that our planet truly has no shortage of incredible things to admire. Almost as if to say that we ought to do our best to act against the careless attitude of the King of all Cosmos, that we ought to protect and preserve our planet however we can. The fact that the King of all Cosmos ends each level saying, "My, Earth really is full of things," fits the consumerism reading like a glove, sure. The thing is though, reading this single sentence with a different pace and intonation, "My, Earth really is full of things." He seems almost impressed by how much there is to see on just one planet in a vast solar system. Every item getting its own dedicated description makes the game feel like it's almost shaking you down trying to describe what makes a watering can so cool to add to your collection. How can you make a scrapbook like this and say that it's not out of some kind of love for what's inside it? The premise of the game, too, follows up in this way. While it's often and very justifiably read as at least a little grim with you being able to roll up and definitely not murder innocent people by shooting them into space, there is something admirative about filling the cosmos one star at a time. Firstly, I'm not entirely convinced we can trust that Katamari is operating on realistic physics because this is not how rolling things up works. Plus, look, see? Those kids are fine. Just don't worry about needing food, water, or shelter. It's okay, they're fine. To me, this still reinforces the game's admirative perspective of our planet. I mean, when you think about how the King of all Cosmos destroyed the stars, what does the prince use to recreate them? The various items, objects, inventions, and beings of planet Earth. You rebuild one of the most beautiful sights in the universe by compiling these things and turning them into stars. These things make light for us in an otherwise dark universe. God damn, even for me that was corny. It's this dichotomy between my takeaway from the game and the principal creator's vision of the game that fascinates me about art, especially video games. It made me ponder a lot about a creator's intent and an audience's reading of a creator's work. Of course, I hope it's clear that I think that this reading of the game is absolutely valid. It is kind of funny though, how even with the director's intentions in mind, I still find myself feeling that optimistic, appreciative celebration over the criticisms of our society's constant need to buy, throw out, and consume everything we can. How much should we factor in the intentions and wants of the artists and other people when forming our interpretations, especially when it's left somewhat open-ended like this? In this example, my takeaway of Katamari is quite different to the director's idea that he was designing the game around. Moreover, I've seen a few videos and articles making the same argument Takahashi does. Does that make my interpretation wrong? Am I media illiterate? Possibly. It's not out of the question. How do we even determine how correct, for lack of a better term, someone's take is on art? I'm not arrogant enough to believe that these are questions someone could definitively solve, especially not me. Damn it though, this game has made my head start spinning, and I've already written this mess of a script about what makes art and creativity so important to me and to the world. It's already been 10 minutes. If you're here for it, you're here for it. The single coolest thing about art is how it invites the world to look at something and draw meaning from it. There are so many people out there with so many varying worldviews and life experiences and beliefs that informs their interpretations that you'll never feel exactly the same way as somebody about even a single work. Some people look at Picasso's art and think that it's a bunch of meaningless shapes and forms mangled together, and others can manage to find meaning hidden beneath the exterior. Sometimes we reveal more about ourselves than we do the art, depending on how we criticize or appreciate it. Art can make clear just how little of the world we can truly know in our single lived experience. It can be a powerful window into the world of someone else's life and experiences too. With that in mind, when making something, the creator or creators are doing it with an idea driving the creative process forward. A message, a setting, a theme, a commentary, a feeling, anything really. This piece is being constructed around a specific idea, and that is what the artists are typically thinking to impart onto the audience. Of course, I don't think any creative person makes something without being inspired by someone else either. Artists themselves are no doubt aware of how malleable a work is when put in front of the world, and the massively variable interpretations people will have of it. This may be the reason why Keita Takahashi says he wasn't really intending on players keying into the subtext of Katamari's story. It was part of his idea behind creating the game, but he didn't need that to be the takeaway for most players. He was okay with the commentary taking something of a backseat to the game being wacky and hilarious. That doesn't change the fact that there was an intention behind almost everything in a creative work. There is some kind of theme being constructed from the creative's point of view. For instance, from the reaction of Luke Skywalker and the dramatic score of this scene, you can interpret that this is meant to be a major dramatic moment, one that marks a low point for our hero. As an audience member, you form an understanding about the story and the characters based on that language being used throughout the movie. That intention exists, the big problem is that it won't get across to everybody who experiences what you make. I think every artist recognizes on some level that there are details that will be lost on the audience and that you can only account for so many different viewpoints. It certainly makes sense of why some stories have the characters look directly at the camera and explain the lesson they learned on their journey. Make at least some of it explicit, I suppose.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
Ideally, both the creator and the viewer meet somewhere in the middle and see more or less the same overarching themes, ideas, and appeal in the art. Of course, depending on how much subtlety is afforded to the viewer, there's no telling how far away the moral can get from what the author was attempting to convey. Some people will watch the finale of Whiplash and walk away from the movie thinking that Neiman succeeding in getting the validation of his abusive teacher is motivational. Don't think about his dad and how horrified he looks. Don't question the methods the teacher's been using and the results of those methods. Two people smiled at the end because Neiman's performance was amazing. It's motivational. This will always be a case-by-case kind of question. There's too much nuance to nail down a definitive answer that applies to everything, which sounds unfortunate, but at the end of the day, that's why art is so important to our culture and history. Having a back and forth deriving meaning from something can be one of the greatest ways to learn about and connect with somebody. Generally, we can agree that one's opinion ought to be supported by the text or work itself. In other words, you shouldn't just make things up, but if there's evidence in the piece backing you up, there's a more nuanced conversation to have there about what something is saying. That's not even getting into allegories. Characters or stories expressly about one thing can easily be read as an allusion to another thing. Earlier this year, I played the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy, and it was amazing. I truly cherish these games, and especially my man Edgeworth. You play as Phoenix Wright, a greenhorn defense attorney, and your goal is to play detective, piece together crime scenes, and fight like hell in court to declare your clients not guilty. One of the most notable relationships in the trilogy is with the aforementioned Miles Edgeworth, your rival prosecuting attorney throughout most of the first game. I took well over a dozen screenshots that felt as though the game was all but declaring Phoenix Wright and Miles Edgeworth a couple. It's never explicitly stated that they feel any kind of romantic attraction to one another, but dear God, I'm honestly surprised there wasn't a massive outcry in 2001 about some of this, or at least I couldn't find record of one if there was. I'm going to be making a mild spoiler for the first Ace Attorney game. It's solely about Phoenix's motivations to be a lawyer. It's nothing about the cases themselves. To those who aren't entirely convinced by these screenshots, just give this a listen. Phoenix says outright that a major drive of his to become a defense attorney was because he wanted to meet Edgeworth in court. He wasn't answering Phoenix's calls or attempts to make contact after he moved away. So Phoenix just casually spent his early 20s and tens of thousands of dollars going to law school, passed a bar exam, and became a lawyer because Edgeworth talked about becoming one as a kid. Miles defended Phoenix in 3rd grade, and Phoenix structured his entire career around wanting to meet him again. He wants to know why Edgeworth changed from wanting to be a defense attorney to becoming a prosecutor. That is not a joke. I am not making this up. I'm sorry, you would be hard-pressed to find anybody who would do all of that for somebody that's merely a friend. Maybe a really good friend, but these two only knew each other for like a year before Miles moved away. Does this mean that somebody is missing the point of Ace Attorney or getting a lesser experience because they didn't feel there was anything there? I don't know. It's important to note that the original version of this game came out in 2001, and openly queer characters were an even less common archetype than they are now. And if a character was openly queer, I have my doubts that it would be portrayed in a tasteful, respectful manner. As somebody who writes fairly often, a constant consideration you're making in the script writing process is the way your lines come off to the audience. You want to ensure that what you're saying is coming off the way you would like. So with that in mind, there is no goddamn way someone wrote this line of dialogue in English without the thought that maybe Edgeworth isn't just talking about the Steel Samurai trial. Something steel, alright, it's not the samurai. Thanks to you, I'm saddled with unnecessary feelings. Yes, unease and uncertainty. There's enough fuel given to that theory that you can't outright dismiss the possibility, but at the same time, if you don't see things that way, it doesn't stop the funny lawyer game from being a funny lawyer game. Regardless of what kind of relationship they have, Nick and Miles' partnership is a consistent highlight of the trilogy that emotionally drives you throughout. Out of all the best cases in these 3 games, all of them involve these two partnering up and putting their heads together, and are by far the best at getting you invested in the game's story, characters, and world. This is all being pulled from the game itself still, so it's not fair to argue that there's no room to believe these two are better friends than we could know. The game is putting that idea out there, however intentional or unintentional, and very well could be a 2001 way of obfuscating a more intimate connection. Whether or not that's your takeaway is up to you. But what about times where what the creator says a game is about is basically wrong? I mean, David Cage might argue that Detroit Become Human is only about androids and was not meant to make any kind of political commentary, but, I think many would agree that is complete bullshit. I mean, yeah, maybe you made the thing with a specific idea in mind, but the game itself is saying something else entirely. When you make very deliberate visual callbacks to civil rights movements and well-documented historical events and symbols, people are going to pick up on that. All of these events and symbols have, believe it or not, massive weight and meaning in the real world, and when you put them in your fictional one, that's going to endow meaning onto that fictional world and what you're saying with it, regardless of what your intention is. Moreover, this statement is coming solely from the director. AAA games like Detroit require hundreds of people to create who are all making tiny bits of creative input on their own. I think it would be impossible for one central designer to speak for all of those people compiling this thing together over the course of years of development. If we could bring it back to Katamari Damacy for a minute, I've really only been comparing and contrasting my takeaway with what the director's read on the game is. I couldn't find any accessible interviews from other designers on the team who could give their input on what they had intended when making the game. Not to undermine Keita Takahashi's contributions to making Katamari what it is, but this game's creation was not a one-man job. It's the very same for franchises like Metal Gear. I and many others love to attribute so many of the series' best quirks and ideas and moments down to the unique vision this one guy had for the franchise. I mean, there are so many little factoids behind the creation of his games that are just fascinating to learn about. However, I know for a fact that Hideo Kojima did not make a game as incredible as Metal Gear Solid 2 on his lonesome. I think it makes sense that, accordingly, his view of what the game is about isn't the only read that's important. He wasn't the one who got in the trenches of the code or attempted to model and recreate a tanker down to the finest detail the PS2 could render.
先ほど話したように、上から下へ、情報が降りるだけじゃないんで、それぞれからまずアイデアを吸収したいということで。
Unfortunately, in the conversation surrounding all massively collaborative projects like this, video games especially, we end up getting very little idea as to who did what. Very little of that information is documented in a useful way. Even in this making-of documentary, we know that people other than Kojima came up with essential mechanics used in Metal Gear Solid 2 that would come back in later games. I'm talking about mechanics like looking around corners in a game built around reading the layout of rooms, but the names of these people who made these foundational contributions and considerations with intention are never shared. Vital creative decisions could have been implemented by someone with a smaller role in the creative process, and we would never know unless someone explicitly mentions it in interviews or documentaries. Even then, it's evidently not guaranteed. All those smaller roles have their own creative decisions to make too, so it's easy for this idea of a singular intention to get messy. In the shorthand, it's much simpler to lump a majority of the praise, or the blame, on the biggest name attached to the project and what they wanted the piece to convey. It begs the question whether even the directors of a creative work should have their vision projected as the most valuable perspective. H-Bomber and Shannon Strucci explore similar questions in their video on director's cuts. Should the director of a film get the final say on what the ideal version of it is? With the current state of 4K movie remasters, I know that I personally have trouble answering yes. They no doubt made huge contributions to ironing out the final product and carrying out their vision, but enough to say that more than anyone else, they understand the final movie and what's best for it? Do they truly understand every aspect of it better than the rest of their massive team who brought it to life? I'm not confident they are, but again, this seems like the kind of thing that varies wildly depending on which movie and director we're talking about. But enough about the creators. How much should my interpretation and subjective human experience even be influenced by these outside factors in the first place? Can't we ultimately just consume a work of art for ourselves and leave it at that? I suppose so, but like all things worth discussing, there's far more complexity to it than that. It's very useful to keep an open mind when it comes to discussing media particularly because I can really only think for myself. As much as I try to view things from someone else's eyes, I can only make a guess. However well-informed it is, it's still ultimately a guess. Whether it's from a dev team or another member of the audience, there's always another angle or worldview that can imbue something with more meaning. Inversely, it can make sense of why that same work didn't resonate with someone else. It's impossible to hold all the pieces for a perspective to ever truly be immovable or set in stone, because that implies that no amount of information or change could influence you. To say that you aren't influenced by outside information or change is akin to saying that you're not human. We are practically born to react to the world around us. It's how we survive. Probably the main reason artistic expression is so special is that it's something you can share with others. To an almost concerning degree, very little gets me as excited as finding out that one of my friends played or watched something that I love. There's this exhilaration to knowing that you can talk to someone else about that thing and why it's so special to you. One of the best things about the internet is that you can connect with people over the media you're passionate about near instantaneously. Asterisk. Talking about art is a massive component of our enjoyment of it, and again, it can be one of the best ways to find something in common with others. A great example. One of my most recent fond memories playing through a game was in 2024 with Persona 3 Reload. A few friends, Shifted Pyro, Phantom Height, Snugboy, and I, were playing through it feverishly right as it came out, and that felt really special because we were all coming at the game from radically different points of view. Two of us had played one of the original versions of the game, Snugboy and I hadn't. Which prior Persona games we had played was also very different between all of us, ranging from the entire modern trilogy to playing some of 5. Over the entirety of February 2024, we all got to compare and contrast which social links we prioritized, who we romanced, whether or not we were making a concerted effort to fill out the compendium, who we were using for our main party, and the reasons we made all of those decisions. That wasn't even detailing our comparisons of 3 Reload to its original counterpart, nor its sequels and our opinions of those games. I can tell you for a fact that this made the experience of playing Persona 3 Reload a far more interesting one, because I got to hear and see how different people approached it. Choices I never would have made, considerations I never would have made, were central to the playthroughs of my friends. Persona lets you spend your free time in the social half of the game in a lot of different ways. It very easily opens that conversation, inquiring whether you went after a certain social link, or maybe you wasted several in-game days maxing out academics really early, only to realize Mitsuru still won't talk to you until you reach a certain point in the story. Not that I speak from experience or anything, it's hard not to be curious, especially in a game that gives you so many options. I learned that I flat out missed a social link when conversing about who we were ranking as the best ones. I mean, that was funny. I mean, 2 of us had already seen the entire story before. How Reload's changes alter or enhance the character of the entire game meant nothing to me because I had no point of reference from which to compare. Meanwhile, these two had to spend weeks not dropping spoilers while being asked repeatedly how Reload fares compared to the older versions. Such a fundamentally different experience between all of us, it was an even greater motivator for me to see the game through to the end. This is unrelated, but this game also started a bit in our friend group of typing "so dance" and waiting for someone else to type the next lyric of the Iwatodai dorm music, so thanks for that, Atlas. Think about what all of this means, though. If it really were possible to only draw value from your own perspective, then this wouldn't be fun, would it? If I only had my own playthrough of Metal Gear Solid to take into account when considering what I think about that game, then I wouldn't care whether my friend played it, would I? What does that offer me in return? Simple. I get to hear what his story with that game was, what he thought, what he felt, what he enjoyed or did not enjoy. I can predict none of these things because he's not me. Hearing this other person describe the game through their eyes gives you a new filter to try on, a new set of considerations you may not have made otherwise. It's more to think about, which helps you better understand your own feelings in the best cases. The very existence of behind-the-scenes interviews, GDC presentations, documentaries, hell, even dedicated trivia YouTube channels, makes a case that the intentions and experiences of the artists are very important to us. There's a demand to record as much information as we can about our favorite games, movies, shows, books, etc., and the trivia behind what made them into the product we cherish so much. It's useful information for other creatives to learn about the design and ideas driving certain decisions made during development and creation. It's interesting to hear when or why a specific creative decision was implemented, among other things. It's important to consider these outside elements because it helps you better iron out your own thoughts, getting into the headspace of the creators. Viewing it from the other end can make a message more clear-cut. It can make sense of a seemingly nonsensical choice. It can generally open your mind to more possibilities. Though, at the end of the day, it can only ever circle back to inform what that experience meant to you. Your opinions and life experiences are uniquely yours, and nobody else can speak for you and express what you feel. It's a vital skill to be considerate, absolutely, but it's equally vital that you're able to think for and articulate yourself. That's why my channel exists. Above all else, my favorite thing to do after I beat a game is to sit down and write in as much detail as I can to try and narrow down what spoke to me about what I just played. There are many things I would never have noticed about some of my absolute favorite games had I not sat down, did some research, watched some videos discussing it, or simply pondered and suddenly found meaning in a random minute detail. Just giving myself some dedicated time to put my thoughts to paper has made me far more in touch with my own feelings, both in general and on the art I've consumed. While broad consensus and the opinions of others can help you understand your reactions better, if we simply parrot those opinions or absorb them too much, we lose our own self in that discussion. I'm guilty of doing this all the time, and I know that I'm not alone. I often try to give more credit to the consensus or whoever disagrees with me than I do my own lived reality of what I thought when I played something. At a baseline level, I already care too much about what everyone else around me is thinking and feeling, and even artistic enjoyment is involved in that mindset. I'll consider replaying entire games to give myself some sort of test that, yes, I do still love Sonic Colors. The internet can't make me not have fun while playing it. Wait a minute, I don't need to agree with the internet. With games being interactive, potentially for long periods of time, there are countless opportunities for a player to miss something important, be it a tone-shifting line of dialogue, a crucial tutorial, or an environmental cue. Sometimes you gloss over something and get angry that the game didn't play fair, criticize the game for it, and oh, we've got a debate going now. I could have been oblivious and at fault for this, but it's arguable that the game didn't communicate that something well enough. Looking online, it's all too easy to receive validation from others that, no, it's not just me, it's the game that's stupid. It extends beyond communicating something, though. Anything about the game that annoys you can get that same validity check, sometimes before you even develop your own thoughts on the matter. Yeah, the buffer in Smash Ultimate is really annoying to other people too. Not my fault. It can be damaging to the conversation when we all coalesce into this single unified idea determining something's quality. We take for granted the emotional experience we go through when articulating our views on art when we just go along with what someone else says. Just because it sounds smart doesn't mean sharing the same opinion is smart, you know? It can validate the feeling that our views aren't even worth considering if they're too unpopular, or if they follow the status quo too closely. The conversation then narrows. It can only go down certain paths to be productive in any sense. When a consensus becomes too strong, discussion doesn't feel like it's on the table anymore. At least, not pleasant ones if we're talking in open forums. It transforms conversation into something else entirely, and it's an aspect of online discussion especially that I hate. It's not enough to have an opinion, you also need it to be an interesting one to hold our attention. Entertain us with your lived reality as a human being. More than anything, attention is the currency of our digital lives, so even if it's for 5 seconds, if someone has a spicy take and can express it as loudly as possible, at any cost, it'll give them those morsels of acknowledgement. How well is that position argued? How articulate and understanding is the person making these statements? Is any of it supported by the piece itself? It doesn't matter. They got you. It creates an environment where so many of the opinions you're hearing and reading can't be filtered through any gray area. Everything is either peak fiction or completely terrible. I'd wager far more people operate in that gray area than they do the insane engagement farming rage bait that generates more attention. But that's not interesting enough. We've got to dress it up to get those clicks, drive that engagement, push that subscribe button. Did you know that over 80% of my audience hasn't subscribed yet? Seriously though, if you could hit that subscribe button if you like this kind of content, I would really appreciate it. I've played certain games knowing full well that no matter how much passion I have to write about them, I am not making a video about it. Why? It risks interacting directly with one of many toxic fan bases who may not enjoy what I have to say about a game they've centered their identity around. And trust me, as a man in my mid-20s with an anime cat girl profile picture from a game I cherish, I have no idea what that's like. Like, I fucking loved Sekiro when I played it, but ultimately I knew that all I would ever do is mention it or use footage of it as B-roll. I am not putting myself in the crosshairs of that fandom. Unless someone clips this out of context, but the thing is they would have had to actually watch the video first in order to get here, so ha! If I have a disagreeable opinion, do I really expect gamers on the internet to give me the benefit of the doubt and listen to what I have to say? Even if some of them do listen, how many more are willing to choose the easy road of LOL mad because bad, or something similar? Why even bother saying anything, we ask, and the fact that so many of these discussions happen online makes it worse. Here's a fun fact: nobody likes being told that they're wrong. If you disagree, I do not believe you, and you are wrong. An additional fun fact, it is also very easy to make people angry, especially when we're online and can manage to forget that the author of the content in front of our faces is a living, breathing human. Odds are, if you come across a contentious point or article or video without deliberately seeking it out, there will be an initial negative urge coursing through you. Whether or not you have the self-control to respond appropriately is another conversation, but it's not easy to stave off that first emotion of, "What are you talking about? I'm not wrong, you're wrong." Even if the thing you came across is articulating the point well, you have to be willing to actually listen and engage with that disagreement. Evidently, it's not an assumed position for the average internet user. On the other hand, sometimes the most interesting and emotionally confusing experience is seeing a popular YouTube video on something you love titled something akin to, "This thing sucks, here's why." No doubt you have a number of disagreements with what is said and how much certain criticisms affect your own perception. But when it's argued well, when it's clear the author is a sane, understanding person who won't vilify anyone for liking a piece of media, it feels more informative than anything else. Now you can see why someone dislikes something you enjoy, but in the best scenario, it can embolden your enjoyment further because you heard it put in a different way. In this sense, I suppose my opinion can be immovable, in a way. My playthrough of Sea of Stars was ludicrously fun for its entirety. Sabotage Studio had their vision of what this game was, and I connected with it strongly, but others did not. Considerations are helpful, and I've tried my hardest to sympathize with those who didn't enjoy the game. I don't think anybody sincerely ever wants to dislike something they spent money on. Still, I can't stop myself from loving it. Does it really affect my life that other people went on a different emotional journey than I did? I mean, I'm unfortunately a people pleaser, so I'll almost always be thinking about what other people are saying, but for the most part, no. As much as knowing an author, director, or other audience member's thoughts can give you insight, they are not you. They don't see the world through your eyes, they can't feel your emotions for you, and they can't control how you think. Certainly, bear some thought as to what the intention of a piece of art is, but it also doesn't have to supersede your genuine feelings or judgment. When we're talking about art, video games especially, so much of what makes it resonate with us is the way it makes us think or feel. More than anything, that's what artistic expression thrives on, the emotions. The reason a good plot twist or an ending that makes you cry sticks out so much is, in almost every case for me, because it made you feel something real that we aren't allowed to feel in our daily lives. Artists want to make you feel something. Surprise, intrigue, heartbreak, shock, terror, anger, joy. These are what compel an audience member to see this thing through to the end, or it can etch it into their minds forever. It isn't always easy for these feelings to align between both parties in some cases. There's often at least minor pushback against even some of the most beloved games if they sacrifice fun gameplay to make a narrative commentary or evoke an unconventional emotion from the player. Even if it's in the service of the story the developers want to tell with their game, you can't really force someone to like that approach. For some, games should only ever strive to be mechanically fun first and foremost, even if that isn't working in the interest of the game's goals. The wants of the developer and the wants of the player can tend to be polarized on that front. Depending on who you ask, the first Resident Evil is either a clunky, disorienting, and outdated relic, or one of the best survival horror games of all time. Fixed camera angles and tank controls actively work against your character's mobility. You are disempowered in a very deliberate way that makes even dodging a single zombie an achievement in a game with like 40 zombies. You have a limited number of ink ribbons per playthrough, so even saving your progress needs to be a calculated, well-considered choice. None of that is accounting for your inventory being severely limited, causing you to backtrack to an item box every 10 minutes, re-dodging the same zombies you've seen several times before. Naturally, if this game wanted to be a run-and-gun shooter, by a lot of metrics, Resident Evil would be a complete failure. That's clearly not what the game wants to be, however. So many decisions made in the game's design communicates that being a capable gunslinging deputy is the very last feeling this game wants to instill in you. In the same way you wouldn't bother criticizing Teletubbies for not having enough jump scares, you wouldn't criticize this game for not fulfilling standards it isn't trying to satisfy. In this way, evaluating the intention is instrumental to giving valuable criticism. It's more than understandable why Resident Evil would be difficult to enjoy if you're used to modern conventions and controls, but it would be unfair to say the game is doing something wrong for not being what you wanted. That doesn't make it above criticism, nothing is.
Wesker, you've become senile.
But it's worth evaluating how realistic your expectations are for something. There is a difference between something being done poorly and something that doesn't gel with you personally. Still, you can't explain to someone how to enjoy something or how to have fun. It just doesn't work like that. If something isn't enjoyable to somebody, the only thing that'll change it is their willingness to find the fun themselves. It's not a moral failure to not have the drive to do that either. When it comes to entertainment, you want what you want. Either you want something familiar or you're looking to be surprised. It's not always going to be one or the other. People are fluid beings. The best any of us can do is talk, empathize, and listen to others. Sometimes that means your mind changes, other times it'll be as it was for me and Katamari. I can recognize and appreciate the developer's read of the game's story and message, but I found my own takeaway that makes more sense to me. I don't know that we can draw a definitive line to perfectly balance our individuality with thoughtful consideration of what everyone else is saying. All I've been speaking aloud is what I believe and what I've felt as a 24-year-old guy. Most of why I'm even making this video is because this subject is so massive in scope that I wanted to try and break down bits and pieces of it to try and make it more digestible for myself. Truthfully, I've been self-conscious the entire time I've been writing this script about whether I'm really doing it any kind of justice. These are questions far too great and nuanced to be deciphered in a single YouTube video. I would wager that this has been in conversation for as long as art has existed because we love trying to find definitive answers to questions that don't have them. Funnily enough, in a random GDC talk I was watching while trying to think of how the hell I was going to wrap this script up, Warren Spector, the director of Deus Ex, has this to say in his post-mortem talk on the game.
And that's the most important thing. It's the combination of those genres that was designed to ensure that players would end up as collaborators with us in the telling of that story. I wanted the story to be as much yours as it was mine and my team's. Okay.
It would have been so nice for such a succinct point of view to show itself to me before I went and wrote this entire thing, but nevertheless, that was incredibly well said. These stories, worlds, and games are the works of talented artists using their craft to make something only they can make right then in the time and place that they're in. They're putting themselves into the work in a way that makes it uniquely theirs, and then once it's shown to the world, it becomes uniquely ours. The conversation tends to pit the two camps against one another, author versus reader, director versus audience. They're ideological opposites, aren't they? Whether we're the ones creating or the people critiquing, we put forth the very same thing. The best we can do is offer up our voice, our vision, our interpretation, and see what the world has to say about it. Above all else, art is a conversation. Really, it's a language. In much the same way, our taste, standards, favorites, and creative choices will change along with that conversation. It doesn't have to be wrapped up in a bow and broken down into a calculated thesis. That's not at all what makes art special. Trying to solve questions about how we engage with art ironically can serve to shut discussion of it down, I've noticed. No doubt, some of it is in the interest of having more meaningful conversations, but I think we often try to fool ourselves that we're smarter than we really are about this stuff. I can use as many fancy words and cite as many examples as I want, but I doubt I could ever really fully capture the essence of why half of my favorite things make me feel happier. I can find the reasons, I can explain the reasons, but I can't explain the full extent of my feelings. I don't think anybody can. When you think about your absolute favorite thing, can you convey with words alone why it means what it means to you? No, we can get damn close, but the full extent can't be contained by any alphabet or language. Words are capable of doing many incredible things, but if they were all you needed, then by proxy you could just read a textbook and say that you know what it felt like to live in the Roman Empire. After all, you read about it, right? You could read a Wikipedia article and get just as much out of Super Mario Odyssey as someone who sat down and played it. We all know that's not how this works. All of the sensations you can enjoy by holding the controller and going on an adventure with so many sights, sounds, and ideas speaks to us in a way words alone never can. How much does artistic intent matter? When should we reevaluate our position about a work of art? Do we prioritize self-expression or listening to other people? As deeply unsatisfying an answer as this is, it depends. It's complicated. Maybe I've ended up walking in a gigantic circle by going down this rabbit hole. I mean, for the past 40 minutes, I've been trying to dissect one of mankind's greatest achievements like it's a homework assignment. That's also just what I think, and I don't know what the resulting conversation from this video will be. It's also exactly why I don't regret making this at all, because whether it's going to be somebody in the audience or myself, maybe even both, somebody can take something away from this video existing. Maybe it's that I'm a big dummy. That's more than possible. There's also every possibility one of you will leave a comment that highlights something I didn't think about at all. Someone, somewhere, will end up learning something. Remember when I started this video talking about Katamari Damacy? What I think is most fascinating about a game like this is how it tells a story using a sparse number of 30-second cutscenes and otherwise lets the gameplay mechanics and the framework do the talking. It lets you do the thinking only if you're interested in doing so. If you're here for a theme or a story, it's there, but if you just want to zone out and enjoy yourself, that's fine too. In a way, the game is more interested in catering itself to your intentions than the other way around. There are a number of great thematic analyses of a level-based game that can easily be simplified down to roll a ball and make it real big. No matter which angle you look at it from, as a game without a story or a game with a story, Katamari Damacy could still be one of your favorites and somebody could get behind it. Whether or not I've said anything of value in this video, I'm not confident I know the answer, but if I could offer any takeaways, I would want it to be two things. Firstly, that these questions and considerations are always worth asking as you experience more art and more of your own life. Even if these questions have simple answers for you, I urge everyone to think about a game you played or a show you watched that really stuck with you. Now, I want you to go online and look up interviews surrounding its development and release and do some research. Do the same for reviews, video essays, and articles responding to its release. Simply by reading the room, you're considering more, thinking about more than you otherwise would. Above all else, use it to look for your own answer and use your own brain. Now more than ever, we ought to practice these critical thinking skills. Keep engaging with art. Real art made by human beings who are creating with their own minds and bodies to share in their experience of being alive on our planet. It is so important to our world for a reason. It speaks to us, it makes us more empathetic, it helps us grow as people. Secondly, I hope it's clear how video games hold the ability to tell truly unique stories and engineer wholly unique experiences. Every playthrough of a game is a story in some form or fashion, not just the one in the game seen by everybody, but your experience playing it. Mario Party is a game with a story in it, really countless ones. Even just watching somebody else play video games in its own right can create irreplaceable memories. It's what made Let's Plays so much fun to watch when I was in my teens, and it's what currently makes video essays so interesting to me. Any playthrough of a game is a story in its own right, so when people can take that further by writing about it, or the game in question, it's an exploration of someone's taste mixed with a recounting of their experiences. It's just a new way of listening to a story. It's pretty clear why the narrative-driven games that make headlines and top sales charts have loads of cutscenes and dialogue. Video games serve as an escape for a lot of people, and evidently, not everyone wants an esoteric story they need to read into seemingly insignificant details to take something away from. It's much easier and more relaxing to watch a cutscene or two featuring full voice acting, because you can just take it all in like a movie or TV show. Life is stressful, to put it lightly, and it's easy to understand why someone wants to let their brain rest as they play video games. That is, of course, not only valid, but possibly the most understandable way to approach video games. Still, as an enthusiast of this medium who wants to see it push boundaries wherever possible, there's something to be said about going through a story simply by living it. Letting your perception, your human senses color in between the lines, finding the answer for yourself. You may not be physically creating something, but thinking about this stuff is exercising your creative mind as a human being. Even a game as insane and seemingly incoherent as Katamari Damacy can manage to say something important. Hell, the only reason I even started thinking about any of this in the first place is because Katamari is so beautiful, creative, and strikingly unique, to the point that I had to just sit and think about it. Never forget how powerful it is to challenge your audience and yourself to take a step back and think.